Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mics, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com. You can find cool stuff in stock every day. And check out our co-sponsor, Mana Traders. Goodness gracious. The best tool to enhance your Magic Online experience. Rent all of the Magic Online cards you want, when you want, in the quantity you need, and be a better player with Mana Traders. And welcome them to the show. Tell them we sent you. You're great. You're awesome. Hey. We're getting our stuff in a row. We're getting our promo codes and our links. We'll have that very, very shortly, hopefully for Thursday for sure.
It's a new year, new changes, and we're excited to have Mana Traders be a part of the team.
Woo! Yay! Plus, we all need a
Traders.
little more Moto in our life.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only place you can play like the real, actual vintage cube. Like the serious, no joke. It's got all the things. It's got Storm. All the craziness is there. So
it's the only place that I can play Palace Jailer. I mean,
yeah,
that's the only card I care about. So
yeah,
Mana Traders. Play some Pioneer.
There you go. That too.
Oh yeah, and looking at all the Magic Online lists to get ideas for Magic Arena stuff and or vice versa, because they got this awesome trading the borrowing program. You can build like Legacy decks. Go play Legacy. You can play Legacy, no problem. Check out Mana Traders. Tell them we sent you. They're great. We appreciate them. I'm Evan Irwin. We get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, MTG Nerd Girl.
Hey guys, welcome back.
Ruben Bressler.
What's up? It's been a minute since we've done a top 10.
And we're doing another one because it's dope. Now, we also begin with our choice with a top comment from our last top 10 in a segment we call Honorable Mention, and where Ruben will tell us who is the most eloquent in letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 Jumpstart 2022 cards. Ruben?
Yes, one of my favorite movie series, Jumpstart 2022.
Mm-hmm.
We had a couple of good entries for this list, but I really liked Matt Rucker's comment. He writes, OMG, Benevolent Hydra is nuts. At its worst, it's a 1/1 walking hardened scales, copies 5 through 8, a relevant creature type, and a great activated ability for any +1/+1 counters decks out there. This card IMO is a huge sleeper and will balloon in dollars quickly.
Well, they were right. This is a almost $17 rare now. Benevolent Hydra is 2 green and X for a rare Hydra that says it enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. When one or more +1/+1 counters we put on another creature you control, you put that many +1 instead, and you tap, remove a +1/+1 counter from it to put a +1/+1 counter on another target creature you control. So it moves them around, it adds multiples, it goes nutty, it's hardened scales ++, and it's got the price tag to show for it.
Yeah, it takes a lot for a rare to get to $17.
But not so much for Jumpstart, man. Jumpstart, they juice that thing. They know how to juice the jump. You know what I'm saying? Juicing the jump is what they do, because that's a hell of a set and terrific value.
Players love their +1/+1 counters. This reminds me of, I mean, obviously this is like the love child between Mikaeus and like Spike Colony. With hardened scales thrown in. All of these are cards that are well beloved and very good. Not hard to see why this one's popular. Great choice.
Yeah, and these days we are about to, as of at least the recording of this, some of what we're talking about, we're about to start proliferating our minds off, here, and just go completely crazy and proliferate everything all the time. So that's going to be a big player. Should be lots of fun. So congratulations to Matt. Please contact us on Twitter, DMs at Magic Mike's Cast for your prize. Thanks again to CoolStuffInc.com for sponsoring this giveaway, and stay tuned for our top 10 list this week. And maybe you can win next week. Next top 10's free gift certificate when we do another one, whenever that is, which we can't promise. But
when the next set comes out, we'll certainly do a top 10 of the new set.
Right.
When
100%.
the mood strikes us. If you have some ideas for top 10s you'd like to see, go ahead and put them in the comments.
Put them down below. Okay. Meanwhile, smash that like button. You know what I mean? One like is
right.
It's what we need. We need likes and loves up here. All right. So let's take a look at our top 10 Phyrexia All Will Be One cards. This set is sweet. Like, going through it, I had a big long list of cards that I could have chosen and talked about and worked with. And like, I had to leave some of my favorites off because I feel like some of these are going to be so impactful and so impressive in terms of what they do that I couldn't leave them off the list.
Yeah, the way I've started to cultivate my list is a lot different than it was when I first joined the show. Because I was like, oh, we need like the top 10 cards that matter, impactful cards that, things that are going to make it. At this point, like, I'm just making lists of things I like.
Yeah,
that's fine.
And roughly ordering them in the order that I like them.
Yeah.
So, because there's just so much. You can literally pick just about anything. I feel like I could talk about 10 forget about 10, like 50 cards.
Same. I definitely went through the same sort of process of like, I have to distill this down to a perfect science. And then at some point I reached this Zen moment where I was like, it doesn't actually, I just going to pick 10 cards that make me happy. A lot of them are good. A lot of them are going to see tournament play. But you know, if we're talking about cards that'll be see tournament play, we need 50 cards. So this is just cards I enjoy that are also good. This is my top 10. It's not the platonic ideal of a top 10.
I was there. It was the top 10 finishers. And here came a giant monster.
I know. I said Leviathan.
You said Leviathan, and I was just like, bruh.
Listen, I was 12 years old, and nothing made me happier than attacking with a Kraken.
That's where you tapped in right there.
Before we start, I just want to say I'm pretty sure of the Planeswalker. I feel like we need to start here, right? Because it was in the live show, I think, but we had a little bit of a pie bet, I guess, to see who we thought was going to get corrupted. And I think we're 3 for 3. Are we
I think we are. Who did you have?
I picked Nissa.
And you definitely have Nissa. Nissa got corrupted.
And you got Jace.
I picked Jace, which I felt like was a bit of a gamble, but was in fact corrupted.
Vraska.
And Evan picked Vraska,
I did
which
pick
was
Vraska.
another great pick. Good job, team.
We're 3 for 3 on this.
That's right.
We did
it.
The other two corrupted planeswalkers were Nahiri
and Luca.
Luca, I don't care about.
He lives on the second floor, dude. I mean,
nobody cares about Luca.
He's on the second floor.
Stupid. It's so dumb.
I'm a dad. I have to ride those dad jokes till they die. You understand?
Yeah.
Not super important, but I thought it was, good to note that like we did it.
We still got it.
That's pretty epic.
We can read where they're going.
Well done. Good reads, everybody.
Look, I'm just having a blast. I'm so excited to play with the set, which we get to do in a few days, because you get to be the bad guy. Like, these are all bad guy things. Everything's gooey and goopy and gross and like just trying to mess everything up, and it's great.
And the other thing I really like about Phyrexia All Will Be One is that it really adds nuance to the different factions. I tried to work a little bit of this into our Dgens and Dragons game, where the different factions look at completion in very different ways. The 7 Steel Thanes that Sheldred is in charge of look at things significantly different than Vorinclex and the Hunter's Maze, right? Who are all about just survival of the fittest. Each of the different factions, and even within those factions, there's struggles for power and struggles for ideology that are absolutely fascinating. Not to mention the fact that now we have these gods on the surface of the world that are adding some other flavor, some other type of leadership. And it's very interesting, nuanced look into what could be a very two-dimensional villain.
Well, let's go ahead and get started here with our number 10. Ruben, what's your number 10?
My number 10, I feel like doesn't give a crap about any of your nonsense, but is in fact a Phyrexian, and as most of the creatures in the set
almost everything is.
Almost everything is. We've got something like 10 non-Phyrexian like rebels,
something like
maybe a Juggernaut or 2, and then we've got all of the 4 Mirrodin 2/2 rebel tokens. But for the most part, everything has been completed in the world that was once known as Mirrodin, and that includes the dragons. I'm a sucker for a dragon, and I think a lot of us are suckers for a dragon. And this is a heck of a dragon, ladies and gentlemen. This is called Capricious Hellraiser. Capricious Hellraiser is a 3 generic red Phyrexian dragon. It is a 4/4, and it costs 3 generic mana less to cast if you have 9 or more cards in your graveyard. So it can be a 3 mana 4/4 with flying. And when it enters the battlefield, exile 3 cards at random from your graveyard. Choose a non-creature, non-land card from among them and copy it. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. So we already have 2 different blue-red decks in Pioneer and Modern that want 1 million cards in their graveyard that take advantage of things like Thought Scour, the classic Faithless Looting decks.
Mhm.
It is not horrifically difficult. There's at least 2 blue-red decks, and then you've also got things like Mardu Pyromancer. There's just a million decks that want to use their graveyard, and this is an excellent top-end card for those decks.
It's a tough card, right? Because in order to get the cards in there, you kind of want to be like self-milling or doing some discard stuff, and then you might be diluting your pool of actual targets that you can hit. So this is a card I'm very much on the fence of when it came to rating, certainly in limited, because it's going to be a tough one. It feels like it very much wants to be doing like, is it cycles, where you're playing a lot of like opt and cantrippy type cards. But yeah, sweet card, a little expensive, but I think in the right home, it's going to be very explosive.
Yeah, we may or may not be talking about a super mondo combo with this thing later in the show from yours truly, but regardless, this is a hell of a mythic in that if you can make it work, it looks incredibly exciting. Like a 3-mana 4/4 flyer with a free spell, basically sort of a weird cascade more or less on it, but the cascade is based on stuff in your graveyard, which you can manipulate. You have stuff like unlicensed hearse to get rid of the lands and stuff like that. You could make it work if you wanted to really get that far. But the idea that this is like silly, huge, fun, crazy, wild effect, like give me them Phyrexian dragons.
And at worst, it's a volcanic dragon, which is a first pick. It used to be a first pick in limited. I'm not sure it is anymore, but
goodness. Well, it didn't have 3 red in its cost either.
Yeah, okay.
But Nerd Girl, what's number 10?
So my number 10 is the kind of limited thing that I'm really excited about. It's just, I love seeing these mechanics be built around in such a way that isn't just bomb dependent. It's not just who gets the big dragon that does the thing. In fact, we just saw a dragon, and in a lot of ways, it was not all that impressive. But what I really like is when we see new sets that sort of bake in all of these sweet synergies into solid things, so you can sort of build this cohesive deck that works together. So we're going to talk about a key piece of removal that will certainly be very good in limited, and I'm excited to see what it possibly can do in constructed. We're going to talk about Drown in Ichor. This is a 2-mana, colorless, and a black sorcery speed spell that says target creature gets -4/-4 and proliferate. That is a nice little bonus that you wouldn't expect to see. And 2 mana for -4/-4 is very, very reasonable. Mm-hmm. It also gets around the Dominus mechanic in this set where the creatures are giving themselves indestructible. This card can deal with those. So it's dealing with the largest like mythical threats in the format outside of the obliterators, and then proliferating and doing a ton of really cool things that the set wants to be doing actively anyway, all for a great rate. This card's awesome.
Oh yeah, I mean, Scars of Bearden came out with Grasp of Darkness, right? For 2 black, there's an instant -4/-4, and this is 1 less color, intensive, and
proliferate,
and 2 great, tastes that taste great together.
Yep. Yeah, this card was on my short list. I mean, there's so much good removal in this set. I think that I could have made a top 10 of just removal spells in this set, and I would have felt pretty good about it. This is an extremely important. I think that this might be the lava coil of the set, of like, if you can't pass the Drown in Ichor test, then you're not playing it. It's possible. Now, we've said that before with things like, Grasp of Darkness lived alongside, I think, Hazoret. So I don't know that that's 100% the case. But this one feels like the lava coil of the set.
Yeah, I mean, you have like Infernal's Grasp was a huge milestone, essentially, kind of almost the Thoughtseize of Doomblades, if you will, and that it would just kill anything, no matter what, and make you pay 2 life. Okay, sure. And now we have Go for the Throat, but now we have Drown in Ichor. So what we found is that over time they've made creatures better and better and better, but they've also made removal better and better and better. They've not made sort of generic spells. They've not made spells. They've certainly not made counter spells better. And they've definitely not made combo spells better, but they've made removal spells a hell of a lot better and more efficient, while also making the creatures look great and awesome. Because if you play your cool X4 and it gets to do its thing, you just get to see it out there be cool, and then I Drown in Ichor, that doesn't feel that bad, right? Yeah. So there you go. Great. So regardless, I think that card is fantastic. And let's move on here to my number 10. Now, this is, well, technically one of my predictions, which I thought was cool. And this is a card that, when I read it, I was just like, and I think with a lot of Planeswalkers in this set, make you kind of turn your head a little sideways and go like, is that Is that all right? I mean, in this one, certainly once I saw the whole swath of them, I felt like, okay, there's one more I feel more strongly about, but Vraska Betrayal Sting is like, this card is real. This card is a little scary. It's could be 6 mana, Phyrexian black mana, a black mana, and then 4 generic mana. It has 6 loyalty, but it has 4 loyalty if you played Phyrexian mana for it, because it is completed. And for 0:, you draw a card, you lose 1 life, and you proliferate. So that's the thing you deal with from now on. After you draw a card and you proliferate, for -2, you can target a creature becomes a treasure artifact with no abilities. You're a treasure now. You're a piece of rock. You go over there, you might make a mana, and that's cool and all, but whatever you did, whatever effect you had is gone now, which I think is brilliant. So her ability, like her unique ability to remove things is really cool. It's not an elk, obviously, but it also doesn't cost 3 mana. But, for 5 mana, you can get out there pretty early, and then whatever they play becomes a treasure. And that's sick. I think that's amazing. In the meantime, she's proliferating and drawing cards. And for -9, you're going to get 9 poison counters. If you have less than 9, you get up to 9. No matter what, you're going to be at 9. And then it just takes a 0:, proliferate, and you're dead. Yeah. Like, is there going to be a poison deck? I don't know. But I have a feeling Vraska's probably going to be in it.
I don't know about that.
0:, proliferate is a lot.
Yeah, I mean, there is certainly a world where Vraska is the finisher in a deck where you just want to deal 1 additional poison counter. I don't think that Vraska is going to be in the poison deck. But she doesn't have to be, because she's an incredible control finisher, control sort of element. For 5 mana, you get a 4 loyalty planeswalker that can either bump up to 5 and draw a card,
while also proliferating all of your other counter stuff,
proliferate
and oil stuff,
everything else, right? Or -2 to get their biggest threat off of the board immediately, with the ability to just do it again the next turn.
Right.
Vraska is an incredibly powerful planeswalker. I think that 5 mana Vraska is going to get cast a lot more than 6 mana Vraska, just because of the way her numbers line up. But she's a great card.
Yeah, I mean, the removal ability on it is pretty interesting. And even at 5 mana, at that point, you're not really worried about ramping up your opponent in any way. Certainly not in limited. Kill a creature, make it a treasure is, not a downside in the way that I would think them. And it's also kind of cool if you are a little desperate and you want to turn mites or something into mana. That's kind of neat. I don't really want to be minusing my planeswalker for it, but there's a lot of flexibility here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's move on here.
And it's much less frustrating to get your commander turned into a treasure than getting your commander turned into an elk. So
nice. Let's move over to number 9. Ruben, what you got?
My number 9 is a card that it's got to have combo potential. There's got to be something here that I'm not seeing just yet. At the very least, it has amazing synergy. It is the Mycosynth Gardens.
Ooh.
The Mycosynth Gardens is a rare land from the upcoming set. It is a sphere land, and it taps to add a generic mana to your mana pool. And then if you pay, it adds a wingding. It adds a colorless. If you use a generic and tap it, it adds 1 mana of any color. So far, it's just a Shimmering Grotto or an Uncharted Shores or whatever. But it also has this following activated ability. Pay X and tap. The Mycosynth Gardens becomes a copy of target non-token artifact you control with mana value X. What an amazing line of text. Oof. Late in the game, when you're mana flooded, you've got enough mana in play, this Mycosynth Gardens just becomes a portal to Phyrexia. Early in the game, it becomes a Mox Opal, like at worst, which will help you turn on your Metalcraft there. And in between, I'm sure you've got some 5 mana 4/4 or, some mana artifact that is really going to help you, fight through things. Perhaps another, at the beginning of your upkeep, draw card artifact kind of thing going on. So the Mycosynth Gardens, I think, is going to find itself as a role player in a number of different archetypes.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the combo is there, but it's definitely a unique card.
This is a $12+ rare right now. This is one of the most expensive rares, if not the most expensive rare in the set. This is a commander player's dream. Now, can it have constructed possibilities? Yes. Particularly because it copies any non-token artifact. That means creature or just an artifact that's doing stuff or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's incredible. And like just the flexibility is nuts, and lands that turn into cool stuff whenever you want them to. I mean, that's fantastic.
The most likely scenario for me for this card in Modern would be Lantern, I feel.
I've actually heard people excited about this in Amulet. Because one mana, it turns into another amulet.
I love that.
Right, at which point it just goes nuts. So
nice.
Yeah. So Nerd Girl, what's number 9?
So my number 9 is actually a reprint that I think is amazing. And if you could tell from my last pick, it is a mechanic I'm really excited to see back. I think the reason I didn't like Proliferate too much before is because I feel like we had too many planeswalkers. Whereas here, they're still more than usual, but they're all rare or higher. So it'll be a little less annoying. So I'm excited to see what Proliferate does when the focus is no longer, planeswalker counters, but instead is things like oil counters. So I'm a little bit more excited to see Thrumming Bird back in the pool. It's a generic mana and a blue for a Phyrexian bird horror. That's a 1/1 with flying. And it says whenever it deals combat damage to a player, proliferate. So it's going to be doing some crazy, crazy things. I'm really excited to see what kinds of things will be proliferating, both in limited and possibly even in constructed.
Yeah, the edge of the knife that game design rides a lot of times, particularly in Magic, of like it needs to be good but not too good, and if it's too bad, we're just never going to play with it in the first place. And Thrumming Bird always felt like it was just that perfect mix of it's evasive enough, it's impactful enough, and it and doggone it, it's worth a spot in your deck. That's what it is.
Yeah, this is going to go along really well with our honorable mention from this week, Benevolent Hydra.
Yeah.
And it's also just it's a not a signpost. It's a staple that I always enjoyed playing in limited in the past. It's 100% going to make oil counters and turning on corruption much easier. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be the gasoline to get your engine going.
So if we're going to look at gas and we're going to get started as soon as possible, we're going to get up and running on turn 1. The actual most expensive rare in the set is a 1 green dude who's ready for you to target him with spells immediately.
Sure.
Venerated Rot Priest is your buddy, he's your pal, he's your friend, and he's ready to hand out some freaking poison counters because he says a very important thing, which I'll get to in a second. For 1 green mana, it's a 1/2 rare Phyrexian Druid with Toxic 1, meaning players dealt combat damage by this creature get a poison counter. And whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a spell, target opponent gets a poison counter. Let's back up just a moment. Whenever a creature you control, that includes it or anything else, becomes the target of a spell, anybody's spell, your spell, their spell, everybody's spell. Even storm spells also considered to be targeting this creature. Target opponent gets a poison counter. This card could kill a lot of players really quickly if it gets out of hand. And I've already seen plenty of really interesting deck lists who are just like, let's go Venerated Rot Priest.
Yeah. This is definitely a way to storm with poison now. If you have something like Ground Rift, which is a not highly loved storm card from Time Spiral, that previously was Niv Magus Elemental's best friend. If anybody remembers that ridiculous deck. This is the best. Like, there's a bunch of 1 green mana cards that grant indestructible and hexproof, and there's a bunch of blue 1 mana cards that grant hexproof and some other ability.
Right.
And all of them are a Venerated Rot Priest's best friend. So.
Yeah. That Storm is interesting because, like, a lot of times if you're storming onto your creatures, if it's like a damage spell or something, then they won't resolve. But I can imagine
all it needs is to become the target of the spell, and then it triggers.
I see.
So even if it's dead, it's still there. That's
fair.
So yeah.
The other cool thing is like giving this like Swiftfoot boots, and then just touching everything else really annoying for everybody at the table for your commander. Like, it just makes all of your stuff like nobody wants to touch it.
Yeah,
right.
It makes you feel bad for targeting any of your creatures, this one or any others. You're like, kill it, go to 5 or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, okay, and then you're proliferating, so you're starting to handle the counters around. Like, this card is nuts. When this said any spell, not your opponent's spells, which is kind of normal, the drawback here is the opponent has to do it for you or whatever. No, you can do it yourself. Woo.
Yeah.
We're
Card's extremely dangerous. I think that this is the card that at least I think that there will be multiple avenues towards a toxic deck. And this is that at the center crux of a probably green-white aggressive toxic deck.
This is where we start. All right. So number 8 here, Ruben, what you got?
My number 8, as I mentioned, there's a million great removal spells in this set. I talked about one of the generic and a white removal spells when we did the live show called Ossification. This is not that card. This is instead the best pacifism that's ever been printed. Planar Disruption costs a generic and a white, and it is a common, and it is better than pacifism in a number of ways. You enchant an artifact, a creature, or a planeswalker. The enchanted permanent can't attack or block, and its activated abilities can't be activated. This is better pacifism, which is a first pick in a lot of limited scenarios. This is a better arrest, which was a first pick in a lot of limited scenarios. This is everything that this card has ever wanted to be. It is incredible that they printed this card.
No joke. First of all, this card is nuts. This card is free. I mean, this is another example of, again, great creatures, great removal. No joke. There was a regionals at one point in time in which this was when I first kind of started playing, in which I sleeved up an arrest. I paid money, American dollars, to play in an event with 4 arrest in my opening deck. I was playing White Weenie, and what's the stone? There was a stone in Mirrodin that turned off all activated abilities of artifacts. Damping Sphere. Thank you so much. So a Damping Sphere, mono white, whatever. And I was playing arrest in a constructed deck. And I mean, this is better in every other. Everything. Everything. It stops everything. It's amazing.
I played arrest in Rebels when I was growing up.
There you go.
Because that's when it was first around, I think.
Yeah, so around 20,
is that right?
2004.
Maybe I'm thinking of a different card. I might be thinking of a different card, but arrest. I also played it in limited and Mirrodin, obviously, but now we've apparently outgrown arrest, so we've made it 1 mana less and target more things, which is crazy.
We've outgrown a lot of things. I have been doing the set review for this, and my ratings have gotten skewed. For years, I've had the same sort of rating pool. Like, you need X, Y, and Z to qualify for a 2, 3, 4, 5. And like the things now that are getting 2s, like the borderline playable cards, are just so good. Now, like there's no more draft chaff anymore. Everything is kind of playable. Like, everything is just 2 and higher. Nothing lower, really. It belongs in some deck, or it's like sideboard specific. And then, like, do you remember when like filler was like, a vanilla 2/3 for 3?
Oh yeah.
Now the worst creature that fills that spot also has menace and ETBs and drains, and like, I'm just like, what the heck?
It's amazing. And I mean, even think of it back to first of all, I remember the arrest thing because my opponent laughed at me when I played it, and then I beat him, so that was great because laugh at the arrest, bro. But yeah, the fact that in Mirrodin you could draft a deck and not have 23 playables. Like, you know how insane that sounds these days? Like, every deck has 27 plus playables easy, and it's just whatever you want your deck to be or whatever, versus back in the day, you could just run out of stuff to play. Just like, I'm running extra land because I can't find a 23rd card that's worth anything. I've seen that. So, Nerd Girl, what's number 8?
My number 8 is an interesting card. I misread it at first, so it's a little bit worse than I thought, but I think it still has an amazing ability. I think it's very strong. I think it's going to come in under the radar, skitter under the radar, as it were. And also the art. Okay, let's take a look at the art at Skrelv Defector Might.
That's right.
Oh,
Skrelv.
Okay. It's creepy. For 1 white mana, you're going to get a Phyrexian Might with Toxic 1. It's a 1/1. It can't block, as all mites, And for 1 Phyrexian white, you can tap, choose a color. Another creature you control gains toxic and hexproof from a color until end of turn. It can't be blocked by creatures of the same color. So it's not quite protection because you can't block with its ability, but you can attack with its ability like protection, which is cool. It gives them toxic, helps with that mechanic. It also just makes your stuff hexproof on a swivel. You don't even need mana available to just protect your stuff forever from being targeted. This card is bananas. And also look at the little guy. He's like eating the finger of a corpse. Oh.
I mean, this is the giver of runes, mother of runes for the mites. And so it's still great on its own turn 1, but it also kind of protects your other mites and or your other creatures, really. With just, you can just pay your life to do that. And that's actually kind of incredible. I'm actually really excited to see where this card goes.
I'm interested of the lore behind the mites because they are a new advent, similar to the gods, right? These Phyrexian gods that are going around now. I'm interested if mites are the product of just like Phyresis that hasn't been moving around a lot, so it just like gets bored and becomes a mite, or if there was a bug that existed before and now those are mites. Well, I don't really understand the lore behind this, or why there's a legendary mite, which is also incredible.
And it's a defector, so like it's like unique from the mites, right? So
right, so it defects from whatever order it was a part of. Yeah, very cute in a disturbing kind of way that you want out of the Phyrexians. I actually had Skrell's Hive on my list for a long time. I think that mites are very interesting and going to be a super good archetype as well.
Yeah, I mean, they want you to swarm, right? That's kind of the idea of the white faction in Phyrexia. Well, while you're doing that, you're really, really going to love my number 8 because it plays right into it. Your 4-drop will likely be in that deck. This one, because it's amazing. Mondrak Glory Dominus is the white Phyrexian god. At least it wants to be. It's 2 white and 2 generic mana for a 4/4 mythic legendary Phyrexian horror. And if 1 or more tokens will be created under your control, you make twice as many instead. Heyo. So, and for 2 white Phyrexian mana and a generic mana, sacrifice 2 other artifacts and or creatures, you put an indestructible counter on it. So for 1 mana, 4 life, sack some treasures, sack some mites, do whatever you got to do. And whenever you're making those treasures and mites, you're making twice as many. So damn. So that ability in and of itself is already super duper popular and powerful. And this card is already pre-ordering for $40 freaking dollars.
Oh, holy smokes. That's a lot of dollars.
Yeah. Mondrak is insane. Once again, I mean, 4 toughness is going to be hard, but we'll see. But it's doing all the things you want. It's already
like Anointed Procession is a $40 card already.
Yeah. If it says double or it says twice, like game over, bro. This is making twice as many mites, like you said, and twice as many treasure tokens. And you can use them to make this indestructible, which is also incredible. What a spectacular card. I do want to point out the art, though.
It's incredible.
I don't know what's happening in the art to any of these Phyrexian horrors. The theory that I've seen is that the horrors that are here are on the surface of the world. You can actually see the background of the sky, and that the Phyrexians had, sort of raised the surface and put everything in the spheres beneath, and that the Dominuses sort of appeared somehow, some way out of whatever oil and Phyresis was still on the surface, and are like sort of making themselves just with nothing to infect, which is kind of wild. I mean,
when you have, the Anointed Procession is a $40 rare, and you put it on a sweet mythic creature, like that's a Mondo combo for value right there, both monetarily and in game. So that card's sweet.
These Dominus cycles are really interesting. Now, we were talking about it before about how they're supposed to be sort of like the gods of it. But the other interesting thing is like Dominus in Greek is like master.
Mm.
So is it like the master of the Phyrexian sort of like guild equivalents?
Maybe.
So it's a unique thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Interesting.
Well, either way,
Yeah,
we got to
I
keep
don't
moving here.
know.
So let's move on here to number 7. Ruben, what you got?
Hey, my number 7 is the only higher that's on my list.
Ooh, okay then. Nerd Girl, what is your number 7?
So my number 7 is a card that I saw that I was pretty interested in. I'm not sure if it's gonna make an impact, but every once in a while we see a card like this and it kind of piques my interest. It's gonna depend a lot on whether the color is good, but it is also a pretty good sideboard card. And we've seen this with other cards that sort of make control decks think twice. And we're going to talk about this, and it happens a lot in green. And that's exactly what Thrun Breaker of Silence is trying to do. For 3 colorless green, we have a Troll Shaman. It's a 5/5 with trample. It can't be countered. And the Thrun Breaker of Silence can't be the target of non-green spells your opponents control or abilities from non-green sources. As long as it's your turn, it's also indestructible. What a haymaker against like control decks, right? Now, sometimes we see these and they don't quite make the cut, but sometimes we do, and it just absolutely bricks control decks, and it can be a pretty nice little like monkey wrench that is thrown into the format, and I like that.
The only thing they give you is you can wrath it on your turn. That's it. That's the only small, tiny out. And there's plenty of spells that can, in green, that can make it indestructible at instant speed. But that's the only out they gave any control deck. This thing is a nightmare. This is like, my God. The last thing I want to play against in blue-white control is this card because I have Supreme Verdict / a Wrath, or it's over. Like, it's just done.
Yeah, I mean, this is bigger than our previous Thrun. It's also good to see that Thrun's still around. Fighting the good fight, being the last troll and all that. Significantly less of a headache than Thrun the Last Troll from a design perspective. They kind of designed themselves into a corner with Thrun the Last Troll, giving it both regenerate and hexproof. This is sort of like pseudo indestructible, pseudo
hexproof.
Pseudo hexproof, but like flavorfully, like sort of with Gaia's Revenge text, which is very interesting and very flavorful. 5/5 for 5, nothing to sneeze at. Still can't be countered. Get that Scragnoth flavor in there. I just love this card. It's exactly what you want a green 5-drop to be.
Yeah, this is the card that kind of rides that weird middle ground of just like, it's just annoying enough. It's got enough abilities and it's got enough of over the topness to kind of get it there. And let's hope that my number 7 can do the same, because this is a card that we spoke about during the live show a little bit. And I think this card is very, very exciting. It's still worth a few dollars, and I think people are still trying to figure it out, but Mercurial Spelldancer is real. At least I think it is in my heart. For a blue and generic mana, it's a 2/1 rare Phyrexian rogue that cannot be blocked. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you put an oil counter on it. And whenever they deal combat damage to a player, you may remove two oil counters from it. And when you do, when you cast your next instant or sorcery spell this turn, you copy it, and you may choose new targets for the copy. And that also triggers her oil counter again. So you're already like getting ahead on the next oil counter. And if the spell that you played has Proliferate, you get up to like 3 counters again on this card. This card is bananas, and I just think it's absolutely ridiculous. And when you see how pushed, even those removal spells and Proliferate are on top of them, this card gets really crazy really fast.
Yeah.
It dies pretty easy.
Does die easy. They had to make it die easy, that's for sure. But everything else,
got Shades of Dreadhorde Arcanist with this card, played in the same deck. I mean, even if you just have lightning bolts, you're pretty happy with that.
Yeah, I mean, if you copy a Proliferate spell, you're putting like 3-4 oil counters on this thing. Like, it's ridiculous. It's wild. So
right,
that to me is scary and in an exciting, fun way. And let's hope it gets there. Let's move in here to our number 6. Ruben, what you got?
My number 6 is I think it's dangerous in a weird way. They've not printed a card like this before, and I don't know that it's gonna be broken, but anytime they print something like this, it is a head scratcher moment of like, can we kill somebody in a brand new way? Prologue to Phyrexia is a generic and a blue instant that says each opponent gets a poison counter and you draw a card. Now, this is the control deck's, I'm going to call it a burn spell, right? Your entire deck is nothing but control elements. Straight up blue-white control, blue-black control, doesn't matter. Only removal and cards that draw cards. And you have a couple of these in there, and you have your drowns in there, and you have a couple of other ways to get poison counters and a couple of other ways to proliferate. And there's no way to remove those poison counters.
Right.
You just sit in the back of the room and hold up your counter magic. And if they don't play anything, your opponent gets a poison counter. And eventually you're going to drown in the quicksand. Much less unless if you play like 1,000-Year Storm with this card, you can just kill somebody in one swoop.
This is the most interesting, I think, honestly, like from the sort of someone just like a pure game design, like, would you pay an extra mana to give somebody a poison counter, and all you're doing is drawing a card. You just get a poison counter, draw a card. There's a ton of proliferate stuff. I kill your thing, and I proliferate another poison counter onto you. How many times do you need to do that before it just gets overwhelming? Before it just gets, something you can't stop, because you cannot remove poison counters, and that's going to be huge.
Well, the other thing too is that I don't know how relevant it'll be in Constructed, but there's also the new mechanic Corrupt. So you only need 3 counters for it to possibly be relevant.
I can definitely see it. I like it.
And getting an extra poison counter outside of combat, getting an extra poison counter at instant speed, that's a big deal.
That is a big deal. Nerd Girl, what's your number 6?
My number 6 is a super simple one. One we're not going to need to talk about a lot, but it's a card that, is beloved. I remember playing with it. It's been reprinted a bunch of times. Lots and lots of times, and it still gets up there $7-10 depending on how long it's been since we've get a reprint. So Phyrexian Arena is going to be a card that all Commander players will be excited to see. Nice at a cheaper rate and dope new art. We have colorless black for an enchantment that says whenever at the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card, lose a life. So pretty simple card, but it's been a staple in all of our lives for many, many years.
I mean, it's like $4 no matter what happens, like $4 plus. The older ones, of course, are more expensive. It has the amazing story spotlight moment of, for the glory of Phyrexia, she whispered Vraska to Jace, which was incredible. They're going to have the Phyrexianized version and Phyrexian text in the complete bundle. So you can get a version like that if you want to. And who doesn't love Phyrexian Arena? I draw more cards and I pay 1 life for it. Totally okay with that exchange. This card's fantastic.
Makes perfect sense with Sheoldred, the new 4/5 Sheoldred that gains life when you draw cards. So now your Phyrexian Arena is doing double duty there. I've loved Phyrexian Arena since I played it at the JSS Junior Super Series as a 4 in my Abzan. We didn't call it Abzan at the time. I think it was Junk at the time. Mid-range deck. In current context, I don't know that it's the best of the 3 drops that are available. But certainly it is going to be on everybody's radar. It's probably a sideboard card at very least in those black decks, which are still, the mono black decks are still top of the heap. So
still very strong.
I'm excited to see Phyrexian Arena back in standard.
Original Apocalypse foil price, $389. All right. So I
hate that.
I know, right? For my number 6, this is actually a card that's kind of similar to Phyrexian Arena in many ways. We actually brought it up a little bit earlier, but it's also very similar to Bitter Blossom. Well, this ain't Bitter Blossom. I'm not saying it's Bitter Blossom, but I'm saying if every single turn you pay 1 resource to get a different resource, which being life to creatures, Skrelv's Hive is right here. And to play Skrelv and then Skrelv's Hive on turn 2, that's kind of where I want to be in my life, because it's a 1 white, 1 generic mana enchantment. It's rare. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life and make a 1/1 colorless Phyrexian Might artifact creature token with Toxic 1, and quote, this creature can't block. And if your opponent has 3 or more poison counters, creatures you control with Toxic have lifelink. And that is awesome, because that's going to offset all of the life you paid to get these out to start with. It's still going to swarm your opponent, which is what you're kind of trying to do. And when you got, your super cool Dominus out, you're going to make 2 of these every single turn, which is also kind of horrifying and scary, which will then also feed the Dominus to make itself indestructible. So it all just kind of come together. It's wonderful.
Yeah. it feels like they're kind of redoing. So this is the time we've seen the most planeswalkers since War of the Spark. This is the time we're redoing Proliferate, and we're doing a bunch of new mechanics. This feels a lot like the Horde Black enchantment that did something similar, where it amassed and took a life every single turn.
Yeah.
And if it became a 6/6, it gained lifelink.
Right.
So it's a very similar mechanic that we're seeing themed throughout the set. This obviously, leans towards the toxic mechanic, but it's pretty interesting. And there's also, it's important to note that this is the second. There's 2 enchantments that make that poop out a dude every turn in this set. So it just tells me that this is going to be a set that will very much reward going wide in this way. And the cool thing is if you're swinging with a bunch of little poopers like this and connecting with a couple of toxic counters, you're more than happy to just throw them under a bus.
Because who cares?
For sure. I also almost had Crawling Chorus on my list. I mean, the entire might of Phyrexia deck, mono might aggro,
Goodness,
was I got more. Was like I could have just put the entire deck list on the top of my list here. Skrelv's Hive also, not for nothing, it handshakes with Winota really well.
Oh boy.
In formats where Winota is legal. I mean, Bitter Blossom in white, sign me up. I'm happy.
It's got, well, in order to play the deck correctly, rather, you have to have the might stuff. All right, I want you to know that.
You do have to have the might stuff.
It's important.
Might stuff.
That's right. Let's move on here to number 5. Ruben, what's number 5?
Skrelvs might get there.
Mm.
Can we no? Okay. So my number 5 again, and this is an obvious one. I think that every time everyone read this card for the first time, they said, okay, we get it. We want black to have good removal. And Drown was already referenced. This is the handshake with that. This is Sheoldred's Edict. It upsets me how good this card is. I don't know where this ends if we try to get better than Sheoldred's Edict. For a generic and a black, we get an uncommon instant that says choose one. Each opponent sacrifices a non-token creature. Each opponent sacrifices a creature token, and each opponent sacrifices a planeswalker. I mean, huge impact on Eternal formats, where oftentimes your protection against a Diabolic Edict is to go get a Dryad Arbor to protect your Merit Lage, or to go get your Colony Garden to protect your Primeval Titan. Now your tokens can't protect your non-tokens, and vice versa. Oh, by the way, you can just spend 2 mana at instant speed to knock off a planeswalker. This card's absolutely ridiculous. I didn't even need to tell you that, but here we are.
Yeah, the 2 mana kill a planeswalker thing is quite interesting. I like that it gets around your opponent just sacrificing a might creature. You have a little bit of flexibility there in the edict ability, and the planeswalker thing is going to be great. I think it's very good in constructed. I think this will sneak up on some people and definitely be a thing we would expect to see.
Like I grew up with Diabolic Edict. Okay, I understand how edicts work. I like edict effects. Edicts are cool. Like if this thing didn't have the 3rd ability, I think we'd still think it was pretty cool / very rad, and we'd be like, oh, they make them get their Merit Lage, or make them get their Primeval Titan and can't save it, and blah blah blah. But like the fact that this answers, Wrenn and 6, or and if the answers to Fairy or whatever in Modern as well, like it's pretty sick in terms of instant speed planeswalker removal. This is amazing. The only honestly downside I see of it is they named it Sheoldred's Edict of all the names. You couldn't have been a little bit more generic there to kind of, let it be reprintable a little bit easier.
I mean, Sheoldred historically, Sheoldred hasn't died yet, so maybe we'll see her more often.
I mean, yeah. Either way, Nerd Girl, what's number 5?
So my number 5, I went ahead and went, a little out of the box. I think this is a pretty cool character, so I'm excited to see what it does. It's a legendary, so it's going to make some waves in Commander, and overall just felt like a really good rate. And I love seeing Phyrexian zombie elves. For a colorless black and a green, we've got a first striking Death Touch. It's a 3/3, and then it says whenever it deals combat damage to a player, choose one. So it's a repeatable trigger, and it says you draw a card, lose a life, destroy target enchantment, or remove up to 3 counters from target permanent. So that's cool. does a lot of different stuff. It's a great rate on its own. It's a massively good rate. First strike Death Touch. Holy smokes. And it's a 3/3.
And no, this is Glissa Sunslayer. And
sorry.
it's okay. We did all but the card name, which is cool because Glissa Sunseeker had first strike, right? And Glissa the Trader had first strike and Death Touch. And this one still has first strike and Death Touch. And to have those two abilities together, it's also a really wonderful aha moment for like players who are just getting into the game and understanding things. And they go like, wait, if this has, that means the other thing dies like before it ever, and you're like, and they go like, really? And you go, they're like, oh, you're like, you get to have that really cool moment of this is a really difficult creature to kill.
I think that, let me think here. It was Voracious Cobra, I want to say, was a 4-mana 2/2 that had first strike and Death Touch. But this was before Death Touch was keyworded.
Yes, an invasion.
It was
red,
red,
green, and 2.
Red, green, 2 generic.
Right.
And that's the first time they ever came close to doing this. And the fact that they have given it to us again now, I mean, yeah, first strike Death Touch is a heck of a combo. Glissa, I feel so bad for Glissa. Glissa has maybe gotten the short end of the stick more than any other character in the lore of Magic the Gathering. Her life was a series of her getting blamed for stuff she didn't do, walking into bad situations, and just being generally unlucky. And it sucks. I feel so bad for Glissa. This card, however, is spectacularly good. I mean, you remove 3 counters from a thing, there's a bunch of oil counters going around. There's no counters on the board, fine, draw a card, get rid of your opponent's hive, like all of the things. I mean, what a good.
Or you destroy target Fable of the Mirror Breaker, like get that thing out of here.
Also works.
Right, because they don't want to block it in the first place, which is why it's so cool. I like it quite a bit. So that card is super dope, and it's just another version of Glissa. She's still around, and she's also serving Phyrexia. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, that was an unfortunate thing that happened she was the main character of the first storyline, right?
Right.
And then she was like, I'm finally done. I'm going to go to the core. And guess where all the Phyrexians were. So,
right. So the next card I have here to talk about is Dream Trawler existed for a while. And that is a damn near unbeatable limited bomb. I think I might have beaten it one time in limited, and that was because it was just so unbelievably overwhelming. There was nothing even that it could do to save you. This might be one of the most sickest limited cards, which means it might just be one of the sickest constructed cards, which does happen. Because how in God's name do you beat the Eternal Warrior in limited? This card is Bo Nanners and changes everything around it. Let's discuss. For 2 white, 4 generic mana, it's a 5 loyalty planeswalker that says no more than 1 creature can attack the Eternal Wanderer each combat. For +1, you exile up to 1 target artifact or creature. You return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of that player's next end step. For 0, you make a 2/2 white samurai creature token with double strike. And for -4, for each player, choose a creature that player controls. Each player sacrifices all creatures they control not chosen this way. It's a Cataclysm. It's Cataclysm that you can do over and over. It's making 2/2 double strikers. You can only attack it with 1 creature, so you can easily defend it. This card is insane. This card is nuts. Can you ever beat this thing in limited? Like, do you just scoop it up? Just thanks for playing. It's been real.
The only reason I'm going first is the only reason I was going to jump in. I wasn't sure. The Eternal Wanderer?
Yeah, the Eternal Wanderer.
This was my number 1.
Oh, it's because I misspelled it. That's why. Well, we've done this before in the show, which is unfortunate.
But that's okay. We'll just talk about it now.
We'll talk about it now.
I'll note that it was my number 1 choice because this card is freaking insane.
I called it the Eternal Warrior. Yeah, it was me. Sorry.
I also might have messed it up. I have no idea. This card is fantastic. It protects itself in so many ways. And though I'm already sick of the Eternal Wanderer, and I haven't even seen it yet, but we have the Wanderer from Kamigawa, which was still being played. And that thing was incredibly oppressive and powerful for a very long time. If your deck wasn't playing it, it was trying to beat it, and that was it. No middle ground. So I'm not happy that we have another very strong Wanderer here, but I'm also storyline wise glad that they didn't just like make it and then make a poopy one, because that would be kind of sad. So I don't know. I'm torn, but this card is fantastic.
Yeah. It is a rare, which Planeswalkers usually aren't, so it is going to be much more relevant in limited.
And so is Dream Trawler. Like,
right.
Unbeatable bombs at rare just seem, they make it such a slog to play.
It's a lot. And I know it's 6 mana. I get it. But, like, my God, this thing just, like, the game is about this card when this card is on the battlefield. I just don't see it any other way.
Yeah. 6 mana sorcery speed, but it is the best 6 mana thing. The best thing you can be doing at sorcery speed for 6 mana in the set, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is bananas and certainly worthy of Nerd Girls number 1. Let's move on here to our number 4. Ruben, what's your number 4?
And the only reason why I didn't put it on my list is because I knew y'all were going to talk about it. So here we are. My number 4. Listen, I already had one dragon on my list. What's better than a dragon? How about make your own dragon? How about build your own dragon whenever you want? It's been a pretty consistent thing that if they print a 3 generic red 4/4 flying haste, it's gonna see play in Constructed. Well, we've got one. It may have just slipped under your radar because it doesn't have the word dragon in its type line. Dragon Wing Glider is, however, a dragon. It's 3 generic red for a rare equipment that has Firmiridin. When this equipment enters the battlefield, create a 2/2 red rebel creature token, then attach this to it. The equipped creature has +2/+2 and has flying and haste, and has the equip cost the same as its casting cost, 3 generic red. So you get your 4/4 flying haste creature, and then if they manage to deal with it somehow, every creature you play for the rest of the game is also a dragon. This card is really good.
Dragons are just good. That's a thing we've learned in Magic throughout the years, and that has not changed.
I mean, okay, all right, listen. I don't like the exclamation mark in the name of the mechanic. I think it's silly. I think it's completely unnecessary. It seems really weird. I don't know why it's always like it seems weird. They never really put it that way. Even Battle Cry, didn't have an exclamation mark. It was like because it's a mechanic. I get it.
Because you don't say Battle Cry, right?
Right.
It is the title of a thing that you are doing, so there's no exclamation. But this is for Mirrodin, and then you charge, right? That's the thing. Yeah. It's different.
Right, but maybe you would say Battle Cry if they gave you an exclamation mark behind it.
We've had exclamation marks in... Sorry.
You're supposed to do the Battle Cry. That's the ability.
Right.
You don't yell Battle
Epic
Cry.
Tagline!
Woohoo! A mechanic. But for what it's worth, I agree. This card is like 30 cents. No one is paying attention to this card. This card is 100% on the radar. It's providing you with that... I don't want to say like Goldspan Dragon. We're talking about 5 mana 4/4 hasters, not sort of their abilities. But 5 mana 4/4 hasters are scary. The fact that 5 mana can then upgrade whatever else you have on the battlefield to be similar is also very scary. This card is going to absolutely end limited games over and over and over again. This is a hell of a bomb rare, and could very well get there and Constructed. I don't know. It's a sweet card. Nerd Girl.
I think I'm going to stick with exclamation point being relevant here. I like the exclamation point. I think it would look weird if it didn't have it. It would just say for Mirrodin with no punctuation. I like the exclamation point. That's where I fall.
Yeah, maybe they should name it something else is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's also fine.
If they name it not the thing the Warriors are yelling, I'm all for no exclamation.
All right. Fine.
Rebellious.
Yeah.
Right. If they're going to go with for Mirrodin, then it has to have the exclamation point.
I guess. Nerd Girl, what's number 4?
All right. So my number 4 is a card I picked because I think it's cool and I hope it gets to see some use. It's a little on the expensive side, but it offers a lot of long-term bonuses. And I think it's going to be pretty easy to trigger because we've seen a ton of this ability just stapled onto good cards that were good on their own without the ability. So Azuri, Stalker of Spheres, is a 2 colorless green and a blue for a Phyrexian Elf Warrior. It's a 3/3, little below rate, but it says when it enters the battlefield, you may pay 3. If you do, proliferate twice. It has the normal ability. This is every time you proliferate, draw 2 cards. So basically, you can pay 3 extra mana to just get a divination out of this. But also there's like Thrumming Bird in the format where every time you connect with it, you just proliferate. And even if your Thrumming Bird's not proliferating, because there's not like a thing happening, you get to draw cards. It's great. Even if the proliferate is like low value, you're still getting a ton here. And this is a great signpost rare for this mechanic. And I hope it can see some play.
Yeah, whenever you proliferate, you draw the 1 card. So when you proliferate twice, the ability to draw the 2 cards. But yeah, anytime you proliferate, which these days is worth 1 green mana, like there's that 1 green mana spell that you can go search for land or just proliferate, and that's all you need to do. And getting the poison counters on there, and Azuri comes out to finish them up. This sounds like a really cool commander deck that you would play and or build that would work around proliferate, which I think would be really cool.
I was going to say proliferate is. When you proliferate, draw a card is an incredibly powerful sentence. You can play this on turn 4 and get there's a bunch of ways to activate proliferate when you play this on turn 4, or you can wait until turn 7 and draw 1 million cards, just absolutely 1 million cards. Azuri is very exciting for a build around. In limited, when your 3/3s for 4 are going to survive a lot more often, and you're also going to play this when you have a lot more mana in play. It's a great top deck late in the game. It's decent as a hill giant on turn 4. Just a really good card.
Yeah, for my number 4, this is an interesting card. Now, as I mentioned in the pre-show, and we were talking earlier about Capricious Hellraiser, Capricious Hellraiser specifically says it wants 9 or more cards in your graveyard, and that's a hell of a number. That's a really interesting number, because let's take a real close look at old Jace the Perfected Mind. They made Mickey Mouse into a Phyrexian. I also think, just not for nothing, that, you could also clearly tell he's not changed that much. He's got like a robot arm and some little robot tentacle thingy or whatever going around, but they could probably reverse it pretty easily and you wouldn't notice much about it. But either way, that's here nor there. The point is that Jace the Perfected Mind now exists, and let's read what it does. For a Phyrexian blue mana and a blue mana and 2 generic mana, you have a 5 loyalty Mythic Planeswalker. Now it has completed, so it can come into play with 3 loyalty if you pay 2 life and 3 mana instead. So for +1 until your next turn, up to 1 target creature gets -3/-0. -2, target player mills 3 cards. Then if a graveyard has 20 or more cards in it, you draw 3 cards. Otherwise, you draw a card. And for -X, target player mills 3 times X cards, which just so happens, if you play it for 3 mana, to be 9 cards. Is that a coinky dink? I think not, because Capricious Hellraiser looks really fun as this being the turn 4 play after old Jace here.
Yeah. And even outside of that, in limited, I just can't wait for someone to just play this and mill someone for 15 and end the game. Just be like, mill 15.
Oh yeah, this thing is insane and limited. It's completely nuts.
Yeah.
Milling is unbelievably powerful in limited. Milling yourself is very powerful in Commander. And in Constructed, it falls somewhere in between. The fact that this marries so perfectly with the Hellkite or the Hellraiser is really nice as well. You get to play Jace on turn 3, mill yourself for 1 million, probably put some other cool stuff into your graveyard. Maybe you played a Mercurial Spell Dancer on turn 2, and you get to have a lot of synergies in there as well. This is it's not the best Jace that's ever been printed, but it's competing against some pretty good Jaces. It's not bad. And goes really well in multiples also, because oftentimes you'll want to knock off your own Jace, mill 1 million cards yourself. Your second Jace is going to have a lot more cards in the graveyard for that second ability. So I think this has a chance in Constructed.
Like Capricious Hellraiser could possibly recast your own Jace for you the next turn.
Also true.
Which is also kind of insane. So super duper fun. 3 mana blue Planeswalkers.
It can recast a Planeswalker? I thought it was...
It's
non-creature, non-land.
Non-creature, non-land is what it exiles.
I thought it was instants or sorcery. Oh.
No. Yeah.
It's anything.
Bro.
Omniscience.
You can even play an artifact.
Yeah, Omniscience, the Portal to Phyrexia. It's going to go a little wonky up in here. So let's move on here to our number 3. Ruben, what's your number 3?
I needed to put the Phyrexian horror that I like best on my list. When I'm playing red decks, I want my 4-drop in my aggressive red deck to end the game that turn. And if I'm playing it in my big red deck, I want it to have a effect on the board that is, you know, good the turn I play it and good the turn afterwards and going forward. Solfim Mayhem Dominus is, it remains to be seen if it's Torbran, remains to be seen if it's in the opposite direction and it ends up being more like Terold was his name, I think. The hammer guy.
Right.
But it is a good
Torolf?
chance of being very Terolf or Torolf. Yeah.
Torolf, yeah.
This has a chance of being an extremely good card. Solfim Mayhem Dominus is 2 generic red for a 5/4. We're off to a good start. If a source you control would deal non-combat damage to an opponent or an permanent an opponent controls, it deals double that damage to that player or permanent instead. Basically, that means that you're doubling up your spell damage and you're doubling up your planeswalker damage. And if you have something along the lines of like a sulfuric vortex or an artifact that is able to deal damage like a curse totem, those get doubled up, but not combat damage. And then it also has pay a generic and then a red Phyrexian and a red Phyrexian and discard 2 cards to put an indestructible counter on Solfim. So it is able to protect itself. It reminds me a lot of Hazoret, right? Because of the stat line. It's a 4-mana 5/4 that can become indestructible. This is no Hazoret, obviously, but it also doubling effects is or out of combat effects is a huge deal. There's a number of cards that are like when this dies, deal some damage, when this taps, deal some damage, and all of those are going to be supported by this card.
Yep, there's a little pinger in the format, and then there's a lot of burn spells that go as low as just shock. There's just a shock in this format, which is pretty neat, and you get to do a lot of things with those cards. Definitely a bit of a build around for limited, but I'm interested to see what this could do for like a mono red burn.
Yeah, I mean, like just on rate, I think it's good enough in limited. You know, I mean, it's just a powerful card for 4 mana, which is fine. You can make it indestructible if you really want to, which is cool and all. But in constructed, this is way more exciting to me because Oni Cult Anvil exists, and it does deal a damage to the opponent. It doesn't drain a life per se. It deals 1 damage specifically, and now dealing 2 and making a 1/1 seems pretty exciting versus otherwise. And yeah, I can see it going off. I mean, this is a $20+ mythic, depending on where you're getting it, and that's very exciting. And again, doubling anything, right? Any doubles, and we're all in. Nerd Girl, what's number 3?
My number 3, I put it on there as an honorary thing just because I think it's super cool, and I was super right about Nissa. Nissa is completed, and we're going to talk about the Nissa Ascended Animist. 3 green, and 2 Phyrexian green mana. So pretty expensive at 7 mana or 5, depending if you want to spend the life. Comes into play with either 5 or 7 loyalty, depending on whether it was completed. And then its +1 says make X an XX green Phyrexian horror, where X is the loyalty. So if you pay full, this just comes into play as an 8/8. Oof. That's big. Or can come into play as a 6/6. For the -1, destroy
or as a
target.
4/4.
Right. If you paid 4 life and you paid 5 mana and 4 life, it would have 3 loyalty counters on it to start.
I thought it only removes 2 loyalty, putting it at 5
for each loyalty paid.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
That was the missed point. Yeah, you're right. So it has 3 options there for the plus.
Right.
The -1 does not matter because it says destroy target artifact or enchantment. The -7, which can be done right away if you play full price, is until end of turn, creatures you control get +1/+1 for each forest you control and gain trample. There's like a cool card in standard right now that makes a bunch of 1/1 forest creatures. That's gonna be kind of scary. And also just like mono green beats, we've always seen Nissa just do crazy things. I could see this ramp out, come down, and then just give everything +7/+7 and kill your opponent.
Yeah, absolutely. This was my number 7.
Oh, nice.
This card is one of the more interesting deck building puzzles, I think, to have in the set. I think that you're most of the time you're going to cast this for 5. I would think. Depends on the deck, though, really. So at 5 mana, 3 loyalty, immediately +1, make a 4/4. Well worth it. 5 mana, 3 loyalty, -1 down to 2 loyalty to destroy an artifact or enchantment. That's a little flimsy, but we'll take it. At 7, this is a Craterhoof Behemoth. This is just kill your opponent in a lot of scenarios. Not to mention the fact that you can make an 8/8. You've got some real longevity there. This card is very, very powerful, and I'm excited to see what people do with it.
Yeah, this to me is one of the biggest question marks in terms of the Planeswalkers in the set, but could also be one of the most surprising, where you're like, oh, I thought the ability read well, but it's really crazy good when you get it on the battlefield, and so on and so on. So for my number 3 here, this is a terrific card, and it's certainly done lots of very exciting stuff. It's one of the more expensive rares of the set versus not, basically. It's around $4 or $5, and it could be more as people get more play and see sort of how it plays and works with it. This is a really cool thing because we have Crucible of Worlds. And so it's fun when we create these little phrases and we say, okay, a Mox does this, and a blank does whatever. And it turns out a blank of Worlds is going to get something to do with your graveyard, likely your lands, because Conduit of Worlds now exists. It is a 2 green, 2 generic mana rare artifact that says you may play lands from your graveyard, tap : choose target non-land permanent card in your graveyard. If you haven't cast a spell this turn, you may cast that card. If you do, you can't cast additional spells this turn. Activate only as a sorcery. So, not a ton of value the turn you're going to play it. You might be able to play an extra land or something if you haven't played one already. But from there on out, they are going to have to really take care of your permanents, because it doesn't say if that permanent were to leave the battlefield, exile it, blah, blah, blah. No. You could just keep on playing the same thing if you're able to get it back into your graveyard over and over. Which is pretty cool.
Yeah. This is another weird deck building puzzle, because this is limiting you to 1 spell a turn, no matter how you slice it. They worded this specifically so that you can't blink it and reset it. You can't, you can sacrifice it. I think that's one of the ways to potentially break this is activate this to get something that sacrifices a bunch of things. Get your Cataclysm, for example, and replay it later or something along those lines. But even just as is, even just played as the card is printed without trying to do any weird chicanery with it, you get to play stuff from your graveyard. Like empty hand, like we've played all our elves out. This thing's great.
Yeah. These sorts of very strict deck building cards make for some really interesting decks. Sometimes they're stupid busted, but it is cool to get the sort of wheels turning and not just have everything be, this sort of straightforward control mid-range aggro.
There you go. So let's move on here to our number 2. Ruben, what's your number 2?
Well, we're just going to keep talking about green cards. We talked about Venerated Rot Priest earlier, but I think that if there's going to be a toxic deck in green, it's really going to lean heavily on Bloated Contaminator. The numbers on Bloated Contaminator are where you need them to be for this to be a player. 3 mana for a 4/4 with trample, 2 generic and a green for 4/4 trampler with toxic 1, and when it deals combat damage to a player, proliferate. 3 mana 4/4 trample, that can either be spectacular and run the format, or that can be Savage Knuckleblade and not do too much, right? There's a world where this is the best thing to be doing. Drown and Ichor is going to be a problem for this card. There's a lot of good removal, but it's 3 mana. This is the best you can do without having something that it comes into play. But if you're playing this with Venerated Rot Priest, if you've got the support structure around this card, I think that this can be a major player.
Toxic ability is really interesting. I don't know how much support is in one set, because I would have expected to see something there that maybe helps. And the interesting thing is it's not like Infect where Pump works. So there's a lot less you can draw from in other sets to make it more reasonable. So these cards are going to be super important. I'm interested to see how far they take it.
Yeah, it doesn't pass the Ichor test, but I would say that Reckless Stormseeker is a card. The only thing this card is missing is haste. right? Like this thing with haste is just unstoppable. Like, oh my God, out of nowhere, it's dealing damage out of nowhere. It's giving you toxic, targets like poison counters out of nowhere. And Reckless Stormseeker really helps enable that, I think. So there might be, some synergy there essentially. But, this is definitely got the numbers that you wanted to have. It just doesn't have the impact. I guess we'll see. Nerd Girl, what's number 2?
My number 2 is an interesting card. It's the namesake of the set, kind of. And we're going to talk about a unique build-around card that I think will be cool in Limited and in Constructed. And that's All Will Be One.
Ooh.
3 colorless red for an enchantment that says whenever you put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, All Will Be One deals that much damage to target opponent, creature. Target opponent, creature and opponent controls, or a planeswalker. That was a little weird jumbled there. And one of the things I wanted to point out here is that it includes creatures that come into play with oil counters. Mm-hmm. So even though it says comes into play with these counters, it still counts as it. It says it in the set release notes. So some of these cards come into play with 3 or 4 oil counters. So you're just everything you play is just gonna have a built-in bolt with it from here on out. Also, the proliferate mechanic here is really cool because if you're proliferating 3 or 4 things at once, that damage is actually split up. It's not a bolt. You can do 3 or 4 damage, strategically placed to get multiple kills per proliferate trigger, which is insane.
Yeah, this is another $15 mythic that just has, it's just one of those cards that you just start asking questions, right? Does this work? And they go, yeah. But what if I did this? They go, uh-huh. And you're like, wait, can I do this other thing? And you're like, yeah. And like, oh my God, this card does everything. It kind of does everything.
Card's very scary. You're right that it's a build around. I'm glad that it's 5 mana. If this were any less, it would be by far the best card in the set, in my opinion. Yeah. All of the Dominuses put indestructible counters on themselves. Everything comes into play with oil counters. You're infecting your opponent, which are counters. Everything becomes a Flame Tongue Kavu. Everything becomes a Flame Imp. Everything you play for the rest of the game becomes the best card in your deck. Just an extremely powerful card. Oh, by the way, there's an instant combo with a 1 mana red card that was printed in the original Zendikar called Quest for Pure Flame. It says whenever a source you control deals damage to an opponent, you may put a quest counter on Quest for Pure Flame. It does something else, but who cares?
Who cares? You're dead. And that's it. This had to be 5 mana, does nothing to the board when you play it. Like, it needed that little small stepping stone to get to something really dumb, which is what your next turn was going to be.
This might be the best Magic card that shares a name with a set that isn't Urza's Saga.
Ooh, well, I guess we'll see. Now, for my number 2 here, this is a hell of a Magic card. And in fact, it's done nothing but kind of piss me off personally about how people have been dragging this in the mud. Dragging it through the mud. How dare you? First of all, how dare you? Second of all, I don't think you recognize the brilliance of the game design around Sword of Forge and Frontier. Yeah. This is a damn fine Magic card, you bunch of spoiled babies. 3 generic mana for a mythic artifact equipment that equipped creature gets +2/+2, has protection from red and green, and equips for 2 like all the rest. And whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play those cards this turn. You may play an additional land this turn. So you're getting to basically explore what they also could be 2 spells. If you're already further ahead in mana, they could be 2 spells you can play immediately. Like, really? Like, are you really this unhappy about it? Does it not make sense? Do you not see how Red has done this weird like impulse Elkin bottle thing where they exile cards and you can play them till the end of turn? That's not like been Red's thing for a couple years now. Like, I don't get it. People are like, well, it doesn't stone rain twice, so I guess it sucks. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? This is a cool sword that does stuff that both of these colors are doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think people evaluate things based on other things that are not super relevant. So like, this is for standard now. This is for, what we're currently dealing with. But if you compare it to every sword, there's 9 of them or whatever. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's going to be some that are better. And, that's just the way it is. Like, if you look at a white draw spell and you're like, oh, this is not as good as Brainstorm. And you're just like, well, no shit. Like, come on.
Yeah. This was the problem that, every 2 mana, 2 black, 2 mana, 2/1 in black that drew a card got compared to Dark Confidant for a decade. And this suffers from, being the child of a celebrity. First of all, the design of this card is gorgeous.
Yeah.
10 out of 10. I have no notes on how clean this text box is. That's one of the things I really appreciated about Sword of Hearth and Home, for example, is another one where it's like you read the text box and it's perfect. Like the abilities are so perfectly married to each other.
Right.
The early swords, Sword of Fire and Ice, spectacular card. The abilities don't really get along. Right.
They're fire and ice.
Sort of Feast and Famine, like they don't really get along. Sort of Hearth and Home, sort of Forge and Frontier. I would have liked a better name. I think Forge and Frontier is a little bit
okay.
It's like not, it's whatever. But hey, can I interest you in escaping to the wilds every turn? Great. Well, here you go.
Yeah, I mean, and Forge and Frontier is kind of cute, alliterative with the F. Kind of neat. I get it. It's kind of.
We do have another SOFAF. After Feast and Famine, which is a little awkward, but here we are.
It's all right. Card's good. Let's move here to our number one now. Nerd Girl, we unintentionally spoiled your super sweet number one.
That's okay.
Which was the Eternal Wanderer. And it is insane. The card is like, I honestly believe Mono White might get there, and we'll talk some more about it here in a second. Ruben, what's your number one?
I have a different Planeswalker as my number one.
Ooh.
It takes a lot for me to think that a Planeswalker is going to really change anything until I see it do it. I think that, and especially if it's a multicolored Planeswalker, but Tyvar Jubilant Brawler is going to shake up multiple formats immediately. Tyvar is a generic, a black and a green for a 3 loyalty Planeswalker that says you may activate abilities of creatures you control as though those creatures had haste. That's a wild line of text that we very rarely see. It's on 1,000-Year Elixir, I think, which is $1 million and sees a ton of play in Commander. But we're not done. +1, untap up to 1 target creature. -2, mill 3 cards, then you may return a creature card with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Listen, this is Llanowar Elf's best friend. This is Bird of Paradise best friend. If you have a mana elf in your life, Tyvar Jubilant Brawler is the best friend that you could possibly ask for. This is going straight into elves in Pioneer, Modern, Historic, possibly even as far back as Legacy. Having the ability to immediately activate the mana of something when you're going off with Glimpse of Nature, or if you're even if you're just trying to chain a bunch of cards out of your hand, is immeasurable. For the low cost of 3 mana, I'll take it.
This is not the one that stood out to me to make the biggest impact, and I'm very interested to see what it's going to do now. I think those are really great points.
I mean, I was not aware 1,000-Year Elixir is like a $7 to $8 card, no matter how you find it, no matter where you slice it.
Wow.
And it was way more than that before it got reprinted in a couple Commander expansions, because that line of text is hugely important for a myriad of different decks.
Oh, yeah. So that's really cool. I love when they, again, marry these kind of old, cool, interesting non-creature or whatever spells into something different, right? Into a new flavor. And so speaking of new flavors, new things to look at, speaking of Eternal Wanderers and what could be mono white control, this card is dumb. All right. This card is dumb. I brought it up in a live show because I can't undumb how dumb this card is. This card is insane. I just can't. How Phyrexian Vindicator, we don't even have Dismember. We have the Drown and Ichor, and we've got like whatever. I hope you have a Doomblade, because this card is going to destroy your world and your planet, and you better be ready for Phyrexian Vindicator, because they're going to stick it in and break it off. It's 4 white mana for a 5/5 Mythic Phyrexian Horror. It has flying. If damage will be dealt to Phyrexian Vindicator, prevent it. When damage is prevented this way, it deals that much damage to any other target. That can be any damage whatsoever. Damage caused by yourself with your blasphemous axe or whatever, or damage that they cause with their crap, with their creatures, with their planeswalkers, with their spells. Any of it is prevented. What? Like their Phyrexian Obliterator, you can block it because all of your damage is prevented. The damage is prevented.
Oh,
You're not
that's
even,
hilarious.
you're just being like, come on. It's crazy. So like,
The damage is prevented is very funny.
it's a lot. This card is nuts.
There is a uncommon 5 damage spell that can't be prevented, which gets around the Dominus triggers.
That's
so
good.
that's a thing that we might see get some play here. I would also just not be surprised to see Dismember, like, oh, we found an answer. Like, I have a feeling that they've been doing this a little bit from time to time where they give us this big, massive threat, and then in the following set, give us the answer.
Right.
Right.
And that's just kind of normal, but at least we have a few tools here. But you're right. Dismember would be nice.
For sure. I mean, we do have a number of tools that can answer this level of threat. We have ossification. We have the pacifism we discussed.
Right.
We have Shale
Binding.
Dread's Edict. We have binding. I
Right.
mean, there's a number of ways for us to deal with Phyrexian Vindicator without dealing it damage. However, let's ignore the line of text. Ignore its second line of text. 4 mana, 5/5 flying. That's it. That's all I need. I'm good. I'm happy with,
I mean, those are incredible
let
stats.
me talk about, hold on. I want to do an old man magic thing. There was a card from Scourge that was a rare. This was a rare called Dawn Elemental. Dawn Elemental was white casting cost. And it also had flying. It was a 3/3. And it prevented all damage that would be dealt to it. This is Dawn Elemental's text.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to +2/+2, and in addition to dealing damage. And Dawn Elemental was a competitive magic card,
Yeah.
arguably.
This is a big card.
Yeah.
Thankfully, it's tough to cast in limited. Woo! But outside of that, I mean, mono white has been a thing for a year and a half, 2 years now. It's been, very dominant in the format for standard. So we'll see how this, gives it a little nudge. And this is also Wandering Emperor, the new one, one of the best cards in the set. Also, Elishnorn, awesome. So White's getting a ton of goodies here, and
Yeah.
Like
Mono
Been
white
a fan.
control could be a thing.
Oh yeah, I 100% believe it. Now, because first of all, we just named off that awesome removal, which happens to all be white. And to give y'all some historical perspective, there are 8 cards in the history, 30 plus years of Magic the Gathering, that are 5/5 flyers for 4 mana. 2 of them are transform cards, Bloodline Keeper and a Transformer. 2 or 3 of them are commander cards. There's Wrathy Dragon that requires you to sack 2 mountains to have it, and Phantasmal Dragon that if you target it, it dies. Hunted Lamasu, you have to give your opponent creatures. This card is 4 mana, 5/5 flyer with absolutely no drawback whatsoever. Like, we've hit another watershed moment. That's all.
And not just
That's all I want to say.
not just no drawback, but an actively amazing text box.
Yes. Yeah, so that was our top 10 Phyrexia all will be 1 cards. You'll see them on screen right now for your review. Take a look at my list, Nerd Girl's list, Ruben's top 10, and we want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about, and we'll select our favorite to win $50 worth of anything at CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Nerd Girl.
thanks for having me, guys. See you next week.
Thank you, Ruben.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Oh, yeah. When we move on here to our final slide, I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsor, ManaTraders.com, my co-host, MTG Nerd Girl, and Ruben Bressler. You guys for watching and listening, and hope you support us at Patreon.com/MagicMikes. Follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at Twitch.tv, at Magic Mikes, on Twitter, at Magic Mikes Cast, our Magic Mikes subreddit, and like the Magic Mikes page on Facebook. Or join us here next week. Well, next top 10, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mikes. Good night, everybody.